Chapter 228. 1. A woman has her eyes set on him? Everyone had their sparkling, wide-eyed gaze, filled with anticipation, fixed upon the man on the throne, waiting for him to give them a rousing speech. Unexpectedly, the man merely curved up the ends of his lips in an unreadable smile and said nonchalantly, "For a miracle that manifests only once every 1,000 years, if only I am to go see it myself, it might turn out to be so dull." What does the Overlord mean by his words? I can see that everyone is so excited about this. Why not we hold a competition in the Darklands to determine the strongest among all of us? The strongest 3 will then accompany me to go enter into Mind-Free Peak, to witness this realm of the gods together with me. Lu Junyao's lips were still curved up in an indifferent smile, but his nonchalant words immediately caused everyone down below to explode into a furor. A competition that would be held in the Darklands, and the top 3 winners will be able to accompany the Overlord to go into the Mind-Free Peak. How great an honor would that be? Were their ears playing tricks on them? But it seemed like there were only 10 spots available into the Mind-Free Peak, and each of the 5 great powers in Cloud Heaven were allowed too. Would so many of them be able to get in at all? That was the thought that went through many of their minds, and someone raised that question very soon. "My lord, the Darklands have only 2 spots. If we are to do as my lord says, to have the top 3 winners follow you inside, we are going to need at least 4 spots to be allocated to us for it to work." The person had spoken everyone's mind, and upon hearing that someone had raised that question aloud, they all turned their eyes to look inquiringly at the man seated high up on the raised pedestal. Lu Junyao clicked the corner of his tongue as his violet eyes flashed with a dark glint. So what if we are given only 2 spots? Those 2 spots given to the Hunters Guild would be a waste anyway, so we'll just have to take the spots they hold when the time comes. All of you have better give your best performance to win the top 3 spots, and your lord here will bring you out to see the world. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Iyuhaya. That's really the style of the Overlord of the Darklands. Pure utter arrogance and reckless willfulness. And it was that very contempt he showed to the rest of the entire world that made all of them willing to submit themselves to him. Just as the debate was growing heated with fervor among the people down there, a black-garbed Darklands disciple suddenly walked in through the doors and said respectfully, "My lord, there is someone outside seeking an audience." Lu Junyao arched up an eyebrow, and before he said anything, it was Sun Luo who asked curiously, "Who is it?" Chapter 228. 2. A woman has her eyes set on him? The person claims to be the princess of the Siam Seas who nearly lost her life when she was persecuted by an unknown power several months ago, but was fortunately saved by my lord's valiant intervention. After making a full recovery from her injuries, she has specially made a trip here to come thank my lord for saving her life. Cough. Cough cough. What did you say? Sun Luo almost choked on his own saliva, staring with his eyes wide. "Are you sure that the valiant hero whom you said saved a person out of righteousness is talking about our lord here? That would be such an earth-shatteringly rare occurrence, like having the sun rise up from the west or seeing waters in the oceans flow in reverse, when the yin and yang of light and darkness have switched places. Not to mention that the Dark Lord's reputation in Cloud Heaven never had a good word said about him. He was someone who could smile while taking a person's life without batting an eye. Meddling with other people's affairs out of a sense of righteousness was something that man would do only if he had lost his mind." Sun Luo slowly turned his head around to glance up at the man whose face was clearly showing a rather doubtful expression. Sun Luo then opened his mouth to ask, "My lord, when did you ever come to be so valiant as to save a princess from the Siam Seas?" Lu Junyao looked at him out of the corner of his eye. "Haven't we always have no lack of people who would come up with all kinds of reasons to try to establish closer relations with the Darklands?" He gave a scoffing laugh and said with contempt in his voice, "But this person has really chosen the wrong excuse to use, which just shows that she does not even know my character at all. This lord here only kills people, not save people." Everyone there was in agreement. That was really the truth. Seems like that so-called princess from wherever those Siam Seas really were was really hiding some ulterior motive. Sun Luo was just about to open his mouth to ask the disciple to go ask them to leave when the disciple suddenly took a step forward as he held an exquisite jade box and said with his head lowered, "This is what the princess asked your subordinate to present to my lord. She said my lord will understand once you see what is in the box." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Lu Junyao said in an indifferent tone. "Open it." The disciple acknowledged the order given, and he then undid the clasp on the outside of the box gently. Inside the box was a strangely familiar-looking piece of purple cloth. Anyone in the Dark Lands would know that their Dark Lord was greatly spoiled with riches and lived in the lap of luxury. No matter what it was, he only used the best, and the clothes he wore on him was naturally the same. And throughout the entire cloud heaven, only the clothes Lu Junyao wore was made from the thread from heavenly silkworms. The Darklands purposely reared a bunch of heavenly silkworms for the sole purpose of making Lu Junyao's clothes, and among the silkworms, there were 2 extremely rare purple heavenly silkworms. Because Lu Junyao liked purple clothes, they had kept them just for their Dark Lord. And the piece of cloth in the jade box could be seen to be made from the thread of those 2 purple heavenly silkworms. Chapter 228. 3. A woman has her eyes set on him? All of Lu Junyao's clothes had its own special mark, and that was why everyone could immediately tell with just one look that the piece of cloth before their eyes was indeed one of their lord's clothes. And to think that a piece of their lord's clothing had actually fallen into the hands of a princess from the Siam Seas. In that instant, thoughts of uninhibited love and affections immediately rose up in everyone's minds. But upon seeing the violet eyes of the man on the throne narrow devilishly, and his aura starting to turn slightly sinister, all of them quickly banished those thoughts out from their minds. All right. With the Lord's unpredictable and highly temperamental character, the princess from the Siam Seas must have secretly employed some kind of trick to get her hands onto a piece of their Lord's clothes. It was actually not too far off from what everyone had guessed. Even Lu Junyao himself did not know how and when a piece of his personal item could have come to fall in another person's hands. But as he wasn't exactly in a very good mood at that moment, the pair of violet eyes on his face shone with a dark, deep glint, becoming even more unreadable than usual. With that clear and obvious change in the aura his body emitted, how could everyone there possibly not sense it? All of them then lit a candle in their hearts for a particular naive and ignorant princess. Their Dark Lord's obsession with cleanliness was well known to all of them. Not to mention something so repulsive like having a stranger come to touch one of his personal items. He wouldn't even allow anyone to enter his room at all, a person who was highly particular about little details like this. Heh. Some of them really did not even dare to imagine the grisly end the little princess from the Siam Seas would come to meet. Everyone was clearly eager to watch the upcoming great show, but Sun Luo was not about to grant them their wish. He cleared his throat loudly and said to everyone, "Let's all disperse. Didn't the Lord just ask all of you to go prepare yourselves so as to win the top 3 positions in the upcoming competition? There is no time for any of you to stay here and be so nosy. Everyone go now." Everyone was speechless. "Sun Luo, aren't you just trying to drive all of us away from here so that you can watch the scandal unfold by yourself?" This was a scandal concerning their most revered and supreme Dark Lord. An occurrence that was to some extent as rare as the miraculous manifestation of the Mind-Free Peak, an event not to be missed. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. But their wish was doomed to be denied. Their position was lower than him, and they had no choice but to be driven away with sullen faces under Sun Luo's dark gaze. In the vast audience hall, only the black-robed disciple was left standing there, still awaiting instructions. After a long while, the man finally opened his mouth to say, "Let her come in." The black-robed disciple acknowledged his orders and retreated outside. After a while, a young woman wearing a light blue long dress came walking slowly in. There wasn't an excessive amount of accessories on her, looking simple and elegant, but the air she carried around her as she came walking in felt unusually noble. Chapter 228. 4. A woman has her eyes set on him? Till the young woman came close, it could then be seen that she looked adorably simple, the kind of girl that one would find hard to hate. Her pair of sparkling, clear, untainted eyes seemed like they were able to look straight into a person's heart, her full and luscious lips pressed gently together a little nervously. Upon seeing the man seated languidly high up on the throne with a lazy expression on his face, she immediately looked like her soul had left her body, suddenly standing frozen in her spot and not moving at all. After a moment passed, her eyes then lowered as she blushed, before she bowed in a ladylike manner. "My respects to the Dark Lord." Lu Junyao glanced at her and said, "You know who I am?" "That is only natural," the young woman said in a gentle voice. A corner of Lu Junyao's mouth lifted slightly. "And you do not fear me?" The young woman's fingers clasped together within her sleeves twisted up in uneasiness before she said softly, "The Dark Lord seems to be rather different from what is said about you out there. My father said that the Dark Lord is highly unapproachable and aloof, but I do not think that the Dark Lord is that cold and heartless, and actually has a kind heart inside." The twitch that was tugging incessantly at a corner of Sun Luo's mouth was going to drive him absolutely mad. From which world had this young woman come to form such a hallucination that couldn't have been more wrong? To think that she could actually say that his lord was kind? People would surely laugh themselves to death. Hearing the young woman's words, Lu Junyao did not show the slightest ripple of change in his expression, but just a darkening of his eyes as he said, "Not to mention the kind of misunderstanding that you have of me, the thing I would like to know is how you came to possess something that belongs to me. Has the Dark Lord forgotten all about it?" Upon hearing what Lu Junyao said, the young woman looked highly surprised. As though she suddenly remembered something, she then went on to explain. "The Dark Lord must be too busy handling thousands of tasks a day. Does the Dark Lord remember how you lent a hand and saved me by killing those evil people who attacked me 1 month ago?" Sun Luo was shocked. Such a good deed did not sound like anything that his lord would ever do. Had he gotten too full from eating and had nothing better to do but to go save a damsel distress? Seeing that there was no reaction from the man, the young woman continued to say, "I was severely wounded at that time, and the Dark Lord saved me out of pity. But the Dark Lord seemed to have something urgent to attend to that day, as you wanted to leave in a hurry. In a moment of panic, I came to accidentally tug off a piece of the Dark Lord's clothes. After being rescued, I asked around and came to know that the material on that piece of cloth was only worn by the overlord of the Darklands." After her lengthy explanation, the end of Lu Junyao's eyebrow twitched slightly, seeming to have recalled something. But recalling that thought just made him want to hit someone. He finally remembered. It was just 1 month ago that he came to know that Qingyu was attacked by the Dark Zombie and was caught in a highly dangerous situation. He had gone on to tear through the fabric of space and time from the Darklands when he departed from there. The dimensional tunnel had seemed to be set against him back at that time, where he came to be transported to the wrong place, ending up somewhere near the Siam Seas. And the young woman before him was indeed being pursued by a bunch of people. Only the heavens knew that he had no intention of meddling with other people's affairs. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. But the young woman had come running straight towards him, and those people had thought that he was one of her companions, immediately attacking him. That was how he came to annihilate the whole lot of them. It could be said that it was all because of this woman that he came to be delayed, or Qingyu would not have suffered such grievous injuries, causing her to need 2 whole weeks of recuperation before she recovered. But as to when the woman had come to rip a piece of his clothes off, he really did not have the slightest impression. He never wore any piece of his clothes for all that long a period in the first place, and that torn piece of clothing had probably been tossed out to heavens knew where. How laughable! She caused a delay in his affairs, and still dared to come show herself before him, claiming that she sought to express her gratitude. What she sought would only be her own death. Chapter 229. 1. My body, my heart, my soul, they all belong to you, Dark Lord. The young woman started hesitatingly, seemingly a little embarrassed as her cheeks turned slightly red. I would call it affinity. Several months ago, my father sent you an invitation as my mother got pregnant again and gave birth to a baby boy. My father was so happy he hosted a banquet and invited all the leaders and people of high authority throughout Cloud Heaven. But the Dark Lord here did not come, and it seems to me now that it was because affinity had deemed that time was not yet right back then, so we were unable to meet at that time. Her shy and bashful gaze, with the hints thrown out in her words, could not be any more obvious to see. Sun Luo had immediately understood that the young woman was uninhibitedly confessing her feelings for his lord. That was really brave and bold, I must say. Respect. But the expression on Lu Junyao's face grew more intimidating and dangerous-looking. He then said slowly, "May I then ask, what could have brought the princess here today?" The young woman's face flushed a deeper shade of scarlet, and her voice was thin as a mosquito's. I am merely thinking to do everything within my ability to repay the Dark Lord for saving my life. Although the Dark Lord left in a hurry that day, I had not dared to forget how the Dark Lord had come descending like a celestial god from the heavens to save me from imminent grave peril. Sun Luo almost died from his well-suppressed mirth inside. This princess here is really just too interesting. With that face his lord possessed and the position he held, he would at least have 8,000 female admirers, if not a full 10,000. But Lu Junyao was really just too eccentric that discouraged any woman from taking the initiative to approach him. There really was a bold woman who came to court her own death several years back. It was remembered that the woman had had the audacity to come up to try to seduce him, but she had merely touched his sleeve when he immediately threw out those clothes, and that audacious woman who touched him without permission was executed on the spot by blood incineration, a punishment meted out within the Dark Lands, dying a heinous death. The woman who tried to seduce him was the eldest daughter of a large clan in Cloud Heaven, and her status was rather extraordinary, but she was killed without even blinking, just because she touched his clothes. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. You who would dare to pursue the matter? Of course no one dared. They still wanted to live. Ever since then, of course there were women who were still crazily in love with that powerfully strong Dark Lord who was as good-looking as a god, but no one dared to come try to make his acquaintance, keeping their feelings hidden in their hearts. They would occasionally pass by the Darklands, seeking for a chance encounter with the man when he goes out, hoping to leave a lasting impression on him. But unfortunately, the ever-unrestrained demonic lord of the Darklands, who always does as he pleases, would never remember any unimportant people, so no matter how hard they tried, he did not pay them the slightest notice. No response was forthcoming from the man at all, and the young woman could not help but feel uneasy in her heart. She bit her lower lip and said in a soft voice, "Great Dark Lord, I know that you do not like people to touch you, and I will not break that taboo. But can I be allowed to remain here, so that I can do everything within my meager power to repay you?" Chapter 229. 2. My body, my heart, my soul, they all belong to you. Lu Junyao narrowed his deeply darkened eyes. Though his face did not show any other emotion at that moment, he looked like he was on the verge of losing control, his impatience at its peak. Knowing the saying that saving a person's life accumulated more good karma than building a 7-story pagoda, Sun Luo very kindly glanced over at the young woman before he opened his mouth to help her diffuse that awkward atmosphere. Though, after his words were spoken, the air grew even more awkward. "May I ask how the princess intends to repay my lord here by remaining behind? Are you going to serve him tea and pour him wine as a close personal attendant, or are you going to undo your robes to play a sweet and docile pillow mate and become a member of the Darklands?" Those words could not be any more direct or straightforward, and it immediately caused the young woman's face to burn a bright, brilliant red. But her reaction had also confirmed that Sun Luo's words had indeed hit the nail right on the head, revealing the young lady's very thoughts. She wasn't just purely seeking to repay the debt of saving her life. What she wanted the most was to gain the affection of this man right before her eyes, and to further their relationship another step. And Lu Junyao was a guy who hated nothing more than having such women come try all manner of ways to try to get close to him. He had lost his patience completely when he was hounded and harassed by all those women before, and that was why he had that woman brutally executed to deter all the other women from coming close to him anymore. Never had he thought that such a thing would happen once again after so many years. If it was his wily little fox that was seeking to get close to him like this, he would naturally be over the moon. But for any other woman, He really didn't have the patience for it. At that moment, Lu Junyao then said in an indifferent voice, I have never needed a maid by my side to attend to me, and I already have specific people tasked to serve me tea and pour me wine. A princess status is highly noble, and you might not be up to such menial tasks. If you are seeking to be the person that shares my bed, I do not think your looks are adequate. So just forget about repaying any debt, as my intention was not to save you. You were just lucky and was not destined to die just yet. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Ew, what a merciless attack that was. Those words struck the young woman, and her red, flushed face immediately turned pale, not to mention just how pitiful she was at that moment. It might not be that bad if he had referred to something else, but he had actually assessed a woman's looks that women cared about the most about to be so low, which must have really hurtful. The young woman actually wasn't that bad looking, pretty and adorable, a little frail looking, which could easily elicit a man's protective nature. But unfortunately, some people were just that insensitive and dense, unable to appreciate the beauty of a young woman like that. In his eyes, he still found the wild and untamable ferocious little wily fox to be much more pleasing. After clearly expressing his rejection, Lu Junyao went ahead to stand up from his throne, completely disregarding the pitifully tearful figure down below as he walked right past the young woman. Chapter 229. 3. My body, my heart, my soul, they all belong to you. Just before the tall figure was going to disappear out through the door, his voice that had become extraordinarily tender and melodious suddenly sounded out. Have you missed me, him? I am to guess? MMM. You must have missed me so much that you were not even able to sleep. Haha, is this the first day that you just discovered that I'm shameless? If I were by your side, I would have been even more shameless. The voice was slowly becoming too soft for them to hear clearly what was being said, but those words earlier had resounded in the audience hall to reach the two other persons' ears. The young woman's face went white, without the slightest trace of color. Who was he? Just speaking to? And his voice had been so gentle. Who in Cloud Heaven did not know that the Dark Lord never had a woman by his side before, to the extent that his preferences for companionship had become suspect that cannot possibly be a woman, right? She still stood a chance. That was how she reassured herself, and her heart. Sun Luo's face was, however, showing a knowing look. From being shocked and astounded initially, he had now become used to it. His lord must be speaking to that little lass down in the lower realm. See how gentle and tender he is. He had heard from Bai Jiyan that the two of them were very close now, and his lord indulged and doted on her very much. It looked highly probable that she would very soon become the Lady of the Darklands. It was said that she was really interesting and possessed unparalleled skills in medicine. Looking at how his lord was acting, she must have captured his lord's heart. Nice and good. Hehe, how shockingly rare. On the other side, Lu Junyao was walking towards his living chambers, and the communication crystal ball in his hand was flashing with a gentle purplish glow. Reflected within that crystal orb was the very little fox his heart had been missing so much just a few moments ago. The moment that tiny, exquisitely beautiful face appeared before his eyes, he immediately could not help but feel like wanting to grab that faraway young lady to come to his side, so that he could hold her in his arms and commit a good bout of bullying. In those deep violet eyes, a fiery blaze burned, seemingly able to incinerate a person to ashes. Qingyu pouted when she saw his face. What is with that look in your eyes? A look that wants to eat you up? The man replied honestly. Qingyu was speechless. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Ever since their feelings were made clear to each other, this man was really such a passionate person. Are you all prepared to go to the Mind-Free Peak already? Qingyu had not forgotten about the thing she wanted to ask him. Lu Junyao raised an eyebrow. It is prophesied that it will manifest within the year, but no one knows exactly when it will be. So I am currently still here in the Darklands. Qingyu nodded. When you leave to go there, remember to tell me about it. Chapter 229. 4. My body, my heart, my soul, they all belong to you. I'm a little worried, because I keep having this feeling that something bad is about to happen, Qingyu said with her brows knitted together. She intuition has always been accurate. Since she was having such bad feelings, that just means that something was about to happen. Seeing the young lady's tightly furrowed brows, Lu Junyao could not help but laugh softly. Stop imagining things. A scourge like me lasts 1,000 years. Haven't you heard of that saying? The heavens wouldn't dare to take me back so easily. His words have just been spoken when he immediately saw the young lady's face on the other end turning an uglier shade. He paused for a moment, and with his low magnetic voice tinged with tenderness, he said, "Moreover, I have such an adorable little fox inside my heart now. How could I possibly bear to let anything happen to me?" The instant his voice fell, Qing Yu's face flushed a bright red, her large alluring phoenix-like eyes flaring wide as she stared at him. This fella, what was he saying? Little fox in his heart? She was getting goosebumps just hearing him say that. You do not need to stare at me like that. No matter how wide your eyes get by staring at me, I am unable to kiss you now. So stop seducing me anymore. Lu Junyao said in a rather helpless voice. Seduce your big fat head. He really can twist his words around. Qing Yu had not even started to retort scornfully when she saw the man suddenly sigh and say in a soft voice, "When would it be before you can come here to cloud heaven and be by my side?" His voice actually sounded rather regretful. What's wrong? Qing Yu asked in concern. Did something happen over on his side? He was looking rather exhausted and lonely, and she suddenly felt her heart start to ache. Lu Junyao blinked his devilishly mesmerizing violet eyes. You know, it was just right before our conversation. A strange woman came running out of the blue here to the Darklands and offered herself in marriage to me. The expression on Qing Yu's face stiffened, her brows tightening together. What? I do not remember how I came to save her life before, and she just came running straight to me, wanting nothing but to marry me, acting all coquettish and sultry right before me. It was really just disgusting. Lu Junyao was acting exactly like a child complaining to an adult after he got bullied. It was thought that if the princess from the Siam Seas were to hear the vile impression she had left upon the Dark Lord, she would surely drown in her own tears. After Qing Yu came to understand what he said, she really did not know whether to laugh or to cry. If that man had been standing right before her at that moment, she might not be able to resist violating that handsome face that was showing such an innocent look. Although that was how she felt in her heart, she kept a serious expression on her face and asked, "How did you handle it then?" I said that she was too ugly and not worthy of me before I sent her away. Qing Yu then said, "Did she then cry?" Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Must this fella reject the girl so harshly and be so direct with his words? At least, leave a girl a little bit of face. What has it got to do with me whether she cried? Lu Junyao scoffed disdainfully. Besides you, I cannot be bothered with anyone else. I belong to you alone. When any other woman lusts after me, I will naturally have to nip any fantasies they have in their head right in the bud. Qing Yu could not help but laugh, her heart strangely filling up with joy. She then said teasingly, "Looks like you're rather enlightened and have quite a honeyed tongue." Surprisingly, the man on the other end then threw her a sly wink before he said in a mushy voice, "I got that honey from your sweetness. How murderously coquettish." Chapter 230. 1. Caught while escaping, how embarrassing not wanting the man who was so far away to worry about her. Qing Yu did not tell him about her intention to go into the forbidden grounds on her own, though Lu Junyao had said that he would accompany her there because it was not known what kind of untold dangers lay in there, but because of the mind-free peak, he was not able to pull himself away at that moment. In addition to that, she could somewhat fuzzily remember a dream she had last night, and the dream had been about her entering the faint mist sect's forbidden grounds. But as to what exactly happened in that dream, she really couldn't recall anything, and that was why she felt a pressing need to go in there to have a look, to see what was it in there that was trying to lure her. On that day, Qing Yu went back to the dormitory after her morning classes. A powerful spatial wormhole suddenly appeared in her room, and she could not help but stared warily at the unexpected phenomenon before her with wide eyes. But when that wormhole faded away, the person standing in front of her surprised her greatly. "Little Burrow? You? Where did you come out from?" Isn't that golden-haired youth in golden clothes that weapon spirit of hers who threw a tantrum and ran away from home a few months ago? But why was he looking so wretched and badly battered? That exquisite and beautiful-looking face was covered with black and white blotches, his hair in a complete mess. Even his clothes were all crumpled and twisted, making for a rather hilarious sight. That weapon spirit of hers had always been vain and proud, paying a lot of attention to his looks and image. How did he turn to become like this after just a trip out there on his own? You got yourself into such a state because you got into a fight, or were you not looking while walking and fell into a hole? Qingyu asked him with her brows knitted together. She had thought that this fellow would remain angry for at least half a year before he would come back. The golden-haired youth ignored his mistress' undisguised teasing, but went on to look at her with a highly aggrieved face. I have finally returned after enduring so much difficulties. Can't mistress at least comfort me a little? Oh. Qingyu blinked her eyes innocently at him. What do you mean? How come she does not seem to understand what he was saying? Where does the mistress think I went off to during this period? Zhongmai asked in a hurt tone. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qingyu immediately responded. Didn't you leave home in a fit of anger? Zhongmai clenched his jaws tightly together. I was indeed angry on that day. To think that the mistress would rebuke me because of a man. But I had intended to return after just a short while at that time. How could I possibly really leave my mistress? And I was trapped by Qing Tianlin, who used his puppetry technique on me. His technique has improved to another level from before, and he imprisoned me in a secret dimension, which I was unable to break out of. That fella Qing Tianlin again. Chapter 230. 2. Caught while escaping. How embarrassing thinking back to the plot Qing Tianlin had hatched up in the fleeting cloud fortress. If little Burrow had been by her side, it would have caused that guy quite a bit of trouble. Seeing that he was able to keep little Burrow trapped, it would seem like that guy's cultivation had increased by quite a bit. Watching the youth who looked like he was about to explode from anger, Qingyu narrowed her eyes smilingly and stretched a hand out to ruffle his head affectionately. All right now, don't be angry anymore, will you? The next time your mistress sees him, I will definitely teach him a good lesson. Yeah, you must not show him any mercy, Zhongmai said sternly, seemingly afraid that she would not bear to strike the guy due to their sibling relationship in the past. But Qingyu had now really let go of that part of her past. With all the things that Qing Tianlin had done, there was no longer any reason for her to be soft-hearted towards that guy anymore. The next time they meet, it would be as mortal enemies where only one could live. Oh right, I will be making a trip into the faint mist sect's forbidden grounds today. Since you've come back, why not accompany me inside? Qingyu remembered that she still had important tasks to attend to, and came to open her mouth to ask. Of course I will, but I think I need to go tidy myself up a little first, the youth said as he looked himself over with a critical eye. Qingyu could not hold back from laughing out loud. I'll give you half an hour to go get yourself sorted out. After fiddling around here and there for a while, and Zhongmai had rid himself of the sloppy mess, he was just about to call out to Qingyu to say he was ready when he saw the young lady seated beside the table with her chin propped up in a palm, seemingly deep in thought. He could not help but be puzzled. Mistress, what's wrong? Qingyu threw a glance outside and her eyes flashed with a glint. Do not leave through the front door. Why? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. We're not going out to do something just and above board here, and it would not be good for anyone to see us, Qingyu explained. The youth did not suspect anything but merely nodded and said, Then let's just use a dimensional portal to transport us to the forbidden grounds then. The real reason Qingyu did not want to use the front door was actually because Lu Ji had been keeping watch from a distance, and she would be discovered if she went out from there. Lu Junyao had ordered Lu Ji to follow Qingyu's every single step, and she must not allow anything untoward to happen to Qingyu, even it would kill her. So it could easily be imagined how diligent Lu Ji was in her duty under the strict orders Luo Junyao gave her, in addition to the somewhat hazy feelings she held towards Qingyu, where she literally kept herself just a mere 5-step distance away from the young lady. Lu Junyao had said that the faint mist sect's forbidden grounds seemed to feel a little ominously evil, and would naturally be worried about letting her go in there alone. Hence he had ordered Lu Ji to keep a close watch on the young lady, to not let her sneak her way into that place on her own. Chapter 233. Caught while escaping, how embarrassing on the other side. It had already been about an incense stick's time since Lu Ji saw Qingyu go into her room, and it looked like she would not be coming out anytime soon. Lu Ji could not help but feel a little doubtful. Didn't she say that she forgot something and came back to get it? Could she have fallen asleep in there? She then called out softly, "Miss Qing, have you found what you're looking for? Do you need Lu Ji here to help you?" After her voice faded away, she did not receive any response. The expression on Lu Ji's face involuntarily changed, and she quickly pushed the door open. As expected, the room was empty, without a single sign of anyone inside. Damn it! Lu Ji could not help but curse. She had been too careless. The Overlord had said that the last Qingyu had a nimble mind that was full of endless ideas, and the last could easily slip away right under her nose. He had even reminded her to keep a tighter watch on the lass, but she had not really believed him. After all, she had found the young lady to be gentle-looking and highly adorable. But the lass turned out to be a wily little fox who was highly skilled at pretending. But it's all right. Her tracking skills in pursuing her targets was deemed to be the best among the 12 courtesans, and she had known that Qingyu would not be so docile as to remain in one place, so she had already set something up on the lass. So if she were to go in pursuit now, it still wasn't too late. On this side, Qingyu and Zhong Mai had already come to the faint mist sect's forbidden grounds. This was her second in this place, and saw that the people guarding the forbidden grounds were still the same three strange people. The aged old man held a wine gourd in his arms as he leaned back against the entrance into the forbidden grounds, snoring thunderously as he slept. The baby-faced young one was plopped down upon a big rock, seemingly picking at something she could not see in boredom. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Only the frosty-faced young man who exuded an intimidating aura looked rather normal, standing dutifully before the entrance, his tall figure not moving in the slightest, like a majestic mountain. Upon seeing that someone was approaching, the man with the frosty aura immediately swung his piercing gaze around. Upon seeing the two people, his always expressionless face actually showed a hint of surprise. He was probably surprised to see that there wasn't a single scratch on the person that came out from these forbidden grounds previously and had actually come here once again. Some unknown insect must have crawled into the nose of the soundly sleeping old man when he suddenly jumped up and gave a huge, thunderous sneeze, causing the bored baby-faced youth who was toying with ants at the side to jump up in shock. The old man rubbed his nose vigorously, cursing and swearing in an angry, mumbling voice for a while, before he saw the familiar-looking face of the young lady. His eyes immediately lit up and he cried out in delighted surprise, "Little one, this old man knew that you are highly blessed. You are actually still alive." Chapter 234. Caught while escaping, how embarrassing. Upon hearing those words, the baby-faced youth immediately stopped playing with ants and leapt down from the rock, to appear right before Qingyu in the next instant. He scrutinized Qingyu from head to toe before clicking his tongue and said, "This guy, really highly blessed. Even the three of us would not dare to trespass in there carelessly, and you had actually come back out from there safe and sound and in one piece. You're really not any ordinary person. Tell me something, did you not encounter any danger in there?" The baby-faced was thinking that no one had ever come out from these forbidden grounds alive before. For the young lady to have come out from there alive and well, she must have been really lucky and have avoided all the danger. Unexpectedly, Qingyu arched up an eyebrow. "I encountered a 1,000-year-old dark zombie. Is that considered dangerous?" She had very nearly lost her life in there, and she was still rather angry thinking about it. Once her words came out, the strange trio immediately gasped loudly in utter disbelief. A 1,000-year dark zombie? To think that there would be such a terrifying creature in these forbidden grounds. That was a foe that could only mean certain death. This young lady must have accumulated good karma for her past few lifetimes to still be alive now. At that moment, the gazes of the few people looking at her became different. The old man subconsciously gulped loudly. "So why have you come here again for? Are you thinking of going in there again?" The last time you went in there to save someone. What about this time? Qingyu smiled disarmingly at him and replied, "Don't worry. I did not come here to create trouble. I have something very important to do, and I really have to go in there. Seeing that we're already such old acquaintances, please let me through. Just pretend that you have not seen me and nobody would know anyway." The trio were stunned speechless. Who here is an old acquaintance of yours anyway? They have not even met each other 3 times yet, and they are now considered as old acquaintances? Tui. They wouldn't be considered passing acquaintances even if they've met 3 times. You want to gain entry without having to suffer for it? No chance. Seeing the look on their faces, Qingyu immediately knew that her words had not worked. The smile on the lips then deepened as she said, "Guys, I really have something very important to do in there. I implore that you do not do anything to stop me, as I do not want to raise my hand against my elders." The old man was delighted when he heard that. "You're thinking of fighting us? A young little baby doll like you is really being rather feisty, aren't you? With your thin arms and skinny legs, you might not even be able to last 3 strokes from this old man here, and you're actually... What is this smell?" It was not known from when a faint fragrance came wafting in through the air, the scent seeping deep into a person, relaxing one's entire body, but also made one really feel like enjoying a deep, relaxing sleep. The 3 people immediately realized what that scent was all about. The old man was the first one to succumb as he fell to the ground. Already a little tipsy from drinking his wine, he was suddenly feeling so sleepy he could not keep his eyes open anymore. As he fell towards the ground, his mouth still spat out these few words, "Little one, you cheated." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, and a dull thud sounded. Right after that, the face of the baby-faced youth and the young man looked absolutely furious, like they wanted to eat Qingyu up as they stared at her, before they both fell to the ground asleep. Qingyu was not so dumb as to clash with them head-on, not to mention the time that would have been wasted. The fact that these 3 people were assigned to guard these forbidden grounds meant that they were not any ordinary persons, and would definitely be of a maniacal level. So she had chosen to use her wits instead. Just as she was waving Zhongmai inside, the toneless voice of a woman sounded behind her. "Miss Qing." A chill ran through Qingyu. Chapter 231. 1. Mysterious intruder. How did she catch up with them so quickly? She had used a dimensional portal to come here. So how did this woman manage to find them so fast? Upon seeing the young lady standing stiffly there, not turning around to face her nor saying a single word, Lu Ji then opened her mouth again to ask, "Where is Miss Qing intending to go? Why did you leave without informing your subordinate?" Qingyu was somehow feeling a little embarrassed as she slowly turned around and met the woman's nonchalant expression on her face. She coughed awkwardly a couple of times and then said, "I am just taking an aimless stroll." If Lu Ji is not recognizing this place wrongly, this place is the faint mist sect's forbidden grounds. If any disciple comes here secretly on their own, they will be punished. Lu Ji mercilessly exposed her flimsy excuse. A corner of Qingyu's mouth twitched, and she helplessly admitted, "All right, I was about to go in there." Lu Ji's brows creased together. "The Overlord gave me orders that Miss Qing must not go in there alone on your own, but to wait for the Overlord to come back first. I am not going in there alone." Qingyu smiled as she blinked her eyes innocently. "Don't I have you to accompany me now?" Lu Ji was taken aback. "Me? When did she say that she was going to accompany her in there?" "All right, let's not waste any more time. The effects of the sleep-inducing incense I used on them will only last for an hour. If we continue to delay any further, we'll not be able to get in when they wake up." Taking advantage of the moment that Lu Ji was still somewhat stunned by her reply, Qingyu quickly went over and grabbed the woman's hand to pull her towards the Forbidden Grounds entrance. The young lady's soft hand that was slightly cold held her fingers tightly. Lu Ji lost her ability to think for an instant and was led right inside mindlessly. By the time she was able to react, they had already walked into the place. Lu Ji could not help but be a little disgusted at herself at that moment. Damn it! Why was it that every time she was faced with this young lady, she would turn to become someone completely unlike her usual self, like she was not able to control how her body reacts at all? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Zhongmai was beside Qingyu, but others would not be able to see him under normal circumstances. He raised an eyebrow to look at Lu Ji and then said, "Mistress, I seem to feel that this woman has feelings for you." I saw that when you were pulling her by her hand. She looked like her soul had left her body, and her eyes looked rather strange. Although Zhongmai was not human, his instinct was however rather sharp. Is it really that obvious? Qingyu glanced at the green-clothed woman with exquisite facial features beside her. Lu Junyao had told her to not get too close to Lu Ji carelessly, as Lu Ji likes women. Chapter 231. 2. Mysterious Intruder, TSK. Just can't figure her out. She's so beautiful looking. Why must she like women? With her looks and level of cultivation, one really wouldn't know what kind of a woman would be able to catch her eye. The Forbidden Grounds looked no different from the last time she came into this place. It was said that many people had come the last time, seeking to get their hands on the sacred Buddha palm lotus, but most of them had died in here. Little burrow, help me sense if there is any aura fluctuations nearby, Qingyu said. Zhongmai acknowledged, and his beautiful gold and silver eyes immediately clouded over with a white glow before recovering back to its original state a little while later. How? The youth shook his head with a frown. I did not sense anything. And, not to mention aura fluctuations, I did not find any signs of life at all. How did it become like this? Qingyu asked in surprise. She clearly remembered that when she came here the last time, she was attacked by a whole bunch of maniacal spirit beasts. No signs of life? She would naturally trust Little Burrow's words completely, as this fella's senses had always been much sharper than hers, so he could not have been mistaken about this. Zhongmai was also looking rather doubtful as he shook his head to say, Mistress, we have better be a little more wary. Devilry's definitely afoot when things turn strange. Qingyu's face was grave as she nodded. On another side of the Forbidden Grounds at that moment, the air rippled strangely and two people suddenly set foot into the place. One of the two people was a young man who looked to be in his 20s, but his face was ominously expressionless and the aura emitting from his body felt highly sinister and oppressive, heavy and suffocating. You're sure this is the place? The Lord's divining skills have never been wrong, and if we are able to complete the mission this time, our Lord would definitely win high merit for it. Let's split up and move separately. All right. After wandering around for a good while behind Qingyu, Lu Ji could not help but open her mouth to ask, Miss Qing, what do you really want to do coming into this place? Qingyu remained silent for a moment before she replied, My mother's soul fragments are in here, and I need to bring her out. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The young lady's aura suddenly turned gloomy, causing Lu Ji to be taken aback. After a while, Lu Ji raised her head and looked at the young lady. I will help you. Hearing that, Qingyu smiled slightly at the woman and replied in a soft voice, Thank you. For an instant, Lu Ji felt as if her heart had been struck by that smile. Her charming eyes subconsciously lowered, seemingly trying to hide how flustered she had felt for a moment. The silence did not last for long. Just as they had taken several steps forward, a heavy tremor suddenly rocked the ground, and a very large crack appeared. Chapter 231. 3. Mysterious Intruder. The silence did not last for very long. Just as they have taken a few steps forward, a violent tremor rocked the ground they were on, and a huge crack appeared on its surface. Qingyu was in mid-step and still had one foot lifted up in the air when the ground suddenly split wide open, very nearly making her step into empty nothingness to fall in. She had just managed to steady herself when another violent tremor shook, and the two people fell straight down the chasm. They spun dizzyingly, but both of them were fortunately able to react fast enough, quickly righting themselves. Descending at a very fast speed, they came to land firmly on their feet. Lu Ji was still able to remain calm and composed because she was confident of her own powers. However, when she looked at the young lady beside her, she did not see the slightest hint of panic or fear either, her moves nimble and agile when they landed. Against her frail and harmless outward appearance, her skills were in a completely different world. Her gaze could not help but deepen as she suddenly recalled Lien Ji's words. This young lady was something whom even the Overlord treats differently, and hence there must be something exceptional about her. She isn't a person that any of them can afford to anger, and she must remember to keep a respectful distance. What is going on here? Qingyu raised an eyebrow and stomped her foot on the ground. It was hard sandstone beneath her feet. Raising her head to look up, she could not see the slightest sliver of light. A corner of her mouth twitched involuntarily. How far down have they fallen below the surface? It was clearly still bright and sunny outside, but it looked like they have fallen down a bottomless pit, so dark that a person would not be able to see their hands before their face. If she did not possess night vision, she would have been completely blind at that moment. So what caused that violent tremor just now? She was deep in thought when the ground beneath her feet shook again. This time the shaking accompanied by an earth-shattering rage-filled roar, so loud that their ears hurt. Qingyu was a little taken aback before she turned towards the golden-haired youth, her face highly suspicious. Didn't you say that there was absolutely no sign of life in here? That roar sounded very much like it had come from a spirit beast. Zhongmai expressed innocence and shrugged his shoulders to say, I really did not sense any sign of life earlier. That roar from a spirit beast tells us of two possibilities. 1. We are far too deep underground and this place has a shrouding effect around it that stopped me from detecting this place. 2. That roar had not come out from a spirit beast itself, but was just a kind of powerful spirit aura left behind from a spirit beast before it died, to intimidate intruders into retreating. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. After hearing him out, without knowing why, Qingyu seemed to feel that the second option was more plausible. But intruders? Could it be someone had come into this place before her? When that thought came into her mind, she immediately said to Zhongmai, Little burro, lead the way. See where that sound came from. Yes, mistress, the youth said, and his body went walking off in a certain direction. Mistress, follow closely behind me. Chapter 231. 4. Mysterious intruder in the darkness. It was hard to see the expression on her face, but Qingyu suddenly went to pull at Lu Ji's hand at that moment and said in a soft voice, Hold on to me. Don't get separated. Lu Ji paused for a moment, and her hand unconsciously tensed up as she reached her hand out to hold Qingyu. At the spot which had been the source of that angry roar, two white human figures flew back out and did a backflip in the air, before landing steadily on the ground. They had come close to what seemed like a mountain cave. Wonder what kind of a spirit beast's aura is guarding this place. It's quite a troublesome one. One of the two figures said in a cold voice. With just the spirit beast's broken remnant consciousness, it's already so powerful. It must have been really powerful when it was alive, at least the 12th level and above. But the limits of this low-leveled realm seem to allow only spirit beasts up to the 10th level to exist, so this was rather bizarre. The other person reasoned. It looks like we'll have to deal with this remnant spirit aura first before we'll be able to retrieve the item inside. Fortunately, with the Lord's far-sightedness, it is already immediately helping us. Hearing that, the two people started chanting, and a large skull head exuding pure evil came out from their bodies. Shrill and ear-piercingly strange laughter coming out from its mouth as it slipped into the narrow little mountain cafe. The next moment, the powerful roar of the spirit beast that previously sounded was heard again, now become one of horror and fear. Powerful forces clashed repeatedly inside the mountain cave, and the spirit beast's remnant consciousness started to become weaker but stubbornly refused to dissipate, like it was fighting with all it had to guard something. Ha! Death is almost upon it, but it's still putting up such a useless struggle. We'll just wait. For 10 breaths at most, and it will have disappeared without a single trace left. The white-clothed man laughed arrogantly, but his boisterous laughter had not boomed out fully when the expression on his face was overtaken by a malevolent look. Who is it? The man beside him seemed to have sensed something as well as his expression became wary as well. From within the depths of darkness, two people came walking out, and there were Qingyu and Lu Ji coming this way. Qingyu threw a measuring gaze over the two strangely dressed men, their clothes the likes of something she had never seen before in front of her. Her expression was indifferent as she countered. And who are your people? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. They did not look like people from any of the three great sects. Hearing that, the white-clothed man did not answer her question but merely stiffened his lips malevolently and said, "We are the people who will send you down into hell." Their spirit auras flared out in an instant which caused Lu Ji's eyes to darken. "You are people who came down from cloud heaven. Who sent you? And for what purpose?" To think that people from cloud heaven had actually come all the way down to such a low-leveled realm, and had so coincidentally appeared here in this place. There must be some nefarious reason behind it. Upon hearing that Lu Ji was able to see through them, the two people could not help but be slightly taken aback for a moment. But they recovered very quickly and retorted, "You're also from cloud heaven? In that case, do not interfere with our business." Chapter 232. 1. Treasure. The spirit beast was closely guarding those rude words that sounded almost like a command immediately caused Lu Ji's face to darken further. As someone from the Darklands, the Overlord had been highly indulgent and protective over them, never allowing anyone to bully his people from the Darklands, or he would pay them back 100-fold. Hence, people from the Darklands were innately haughty and proud, and Lu Ji was no different as well. She was already carrying an instinctive sense of enmity towards those two people, and it was becoming harder to contain the hatred in her heart. "Don't be rash." Qingyu held Lu Ji's arm and shook her head slightly. "Mistress, there are extremely powerful spirit energy fluctuations in this cave," the golden-haired youth said softly, but the expression on his face was a little puzzled. "But the spirit aura does not seem to be from a human, but a divine beast." "What?" Qingyu's eyes widened in surprise. A divine beast? A creature that was so rare that they existed only in legends, super spirit beasts that were more powerful than peak-level spirit beasts that have reached several tens in their levels. Only then could they be called divine beasts. But in a low-leveled realm like the Constellation Lands, how could the aura of a divine beast possibly exist? One might not even be able to find such a thing in the White Finns lands. This was really too astounding. "Little Burrow, are you absolutely certain of that?" Qingyu knitted up her brows to ask. The youth did not immediately reply, and then went on to simply say, "Just listen to the sounds in there." The two white-clothed men continued to relentlessly attack the thing inside the cave, and she seemed to be able to sense that the angry roar she heard earlier sounded like it was crying out in sadness and despair, a lot softer now, which caused a feeling of sadness to surge up inside her heart. It seemed to have sensed its impending death, its roars no longer resisting that strongly as it fought, but seemingly still filled with a sliver of hope in a desperate cry for help. "Save me. I beg you to save me. I must not die." That's right. It was crying for help. That was the message that came into her mind in that instant as she heard the sound coming out from inside the cave. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qingyu could not help but be surprised when she discovered that she could actually understand what the roars were trying to convey. But before she could give it any further thought, she found that the roars were growing softer and softer. Zhongmai and his mistress had always been linked in their minds, and he immediately knew what her intentions were. He then asked Qingyu, "Mistress, you want to save it?" Qingyu's eyes grew deep before she came to say in a calm voice, "Yes, of course we must." Those two people's cultivation powers are not to be underestimated, their entire persons emitting a highly evil aura. It is not advisable for Mistress to move against them, so you can just leave it to me. After the youth finished saying that, he immediately moved stealthily away from Qingyu's side. He usually moved about in an invisible state, and other people were not able to see him at all. It was only when he engaged in battle that he would automatically come to reveal himself. Chapter 232. 2. Treasure. The spirit beast was closely guarding hints. After one of the white-clothed men was sent flying from a powerful blow, the good-looking youth, all a-glitter in gold, suddenly came to appear before everyone there, catching everyone off guard. "Who are you? How dare you sneak up and attack us?" When the other person saw his companion was sent flying tens of meters away from a powerful blow and was endlessly vomiting out blood, a fiery rage rose inside him. His face was malevolent, like he wanted to eat someone up. We had not wanted to stir up any trouble in this low-level lands, but since you've come seeking your own deaths, then you cannot blame me. What a braggart! Zhang Mai's lips curled up into a contemptuous smile, the shape of his narrowed gold and silver irises transforming into inverted triangles as he assumed his original form. A golden rhinoceros python that was over 10 meters tall, his girth as thick as 3 or 4 men's waist put together as it flicked its red forked tongue. Its long snake tail curled around the 2 white-clothed men and then tossed them up into the air before catching them back in its grip, seeming to be toying with them. The sudden appearance of such an unbelievably massive python had not only stunned the 2 white-clothed men into a mindless daze, even the ever-calm and composed Lu Ji was unable to react for a good while. That small, exquisite-looking face turned slightly pale, and it seemed like she had been shocked by the scene before her eyes as well. Qing Yu's eyes merely showed a faint hint of helplessness. Did he really have to immediately cause such a big stir? Is it really necessary for him to reveal his true form? But she has not seen Zhang Mai assume his original form for so many years, and it looks like he had grown quite a lot bigger. The 2 white-clothed men were haplessly being tossed and caught by the massive python. Intense dizziness and fear caused their stomachs to turn as nausea wrecked at them, but they were unable to vomit anything out, which just worsened the agony. As highly skilled pugilists who were respected in Cloud Heaven, it was unthinkable that they were made to suffer such humiliation here in this low-level realm, and were helpless to do anything about it. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Only the heavens would know where this damn giant python had popped out from all of a sudden, seeming like it had grown bored with the game. The massive python let out a cold, scornful snort, and with a light squeeze of its tail, 2 clear, crisp cracks were heard. The necks of the 2 white-clothed people had been snapped in 2, their bodies mangled and deformed by crushing force, turned into 2 grisly, unidentifiable masses of blood and gore. Their corpses were then dumped like garbage among the pile of rocks at the side. Lu Ji's face turned a little paler subconsciously. What a powerful spirit beast! She had not been fully confident that she would be able to walk out of that place alive today, but she had promised the Overlord that she would definitely keep Qingyu safe and sound. Lu Ji's seductive eyes flashed with a sharp glint of steely resolve as she moved herself innocuously before Qingyu, readying herself to withstand the massive python's attack that would soon come. Chapter 232. 3. Treasure the spirit beast was closely guarding instead. The young lady behind her laughed softly and said, "All right, little burro, hurry up and change back already. Why did you have to make it so bloody? Can't you see how much you terrified this beautiful big sister here?" Lu Ji was still unable to react to those words when they reached her ears, but saw the terrifyingly massive python suddenly shrink in size right before her eyes as the young lady's voice fell. A brilliant golden light then flashed for an instant right in front of her, and there was no longer any signs of that frightening python anymore. A tall, beautiful-looking golden-haired youth stood in its place, an easy smile on his lips, looking every inch an obedient and handsome-looking youth. Especially when Qingyu had called for him to come over, he had even lowered himself to allow the young lady to violate the hair on his head, his uniquely gold and silver pair of eyes shining with a warm, gentle light, looking exceptionally moving. It was such an adorable sight it could make anyone blush. Who could possibly believe that this obedient and harmless-looking youth here was actually that massive python who had just killed 2 men in an instant just moments ago? Lu Ji's face underwent a series of changes before she said with a look of utter disbelief, "He is?" Qingyu smiled and went on to explain, "He is my weapon spirit, and his original form is actually a giant golden rhinoceros python. Wasn't he just so majestic?" Zhang Mai would usually not reveal his true form before people so easily. Of course, people who saw his true form before were basically already dead. But since Lu Ji was one of Lu Junyao's subordinates, she could be considered to be an ally, so there was no harm in letting her see him in that form. Upon hearing that, Lu Ji was even more astounded. A weapon spirit that possesses its own spirit beast form? She had never heard anything so bizarre before. Although it sounded absolutely unbelievable, that is the absolute truth. Qingyu went on to ruffle the youth's head once again. Is indeed a weapon spirit that possesses a spirit beast form. Luji took a good part of the day to fully digest the news she had just heard, before she finally came to a conclusion. The woman the Overlord has set his eyes on was no ordinary person indeed. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU with the deaths of the two white-clothed men. The cries that came from inside the cave slowly quietened down. Qingyu walked inside slowly as she scanned the surroundings, but she did not find any traces of any spirit beasts. She could not help but be a little surprised. Where had those cries came from? Just as she was feeling a little puzzled, something came to float down gently as it descended right before her eyes, which caused her eyes to widen for an instant. It was a great phoenix whose body was red as blood, measuring several tens of meters in length, its immense body filling up the entire mountain cave. It looked ephemeral and seemed to be in its spirit state, almost like the slightest gust of wind would cause it to disperse and fade. Chapter 232. 4. Treasure. The spirit beast was closely guarding it looked highly weary and tired, its eyes unable to even open. But as Qingyu approached it, those eyes opened very slowly, revealing a pair of beautiful golden irises. Spirit beasts were supposed to be naturally wary of humans, filled with hatred and disgust towards them. But for some unknown reason, the phoenix seemed to trust Qingyu very much, its body not even flinching as she came very close to its body, its golden eyes gazing warmly and gently at her. Are you all right? Qingyu could not help but to ask in concern when she saw how weak and frail the phoenix looked. Thank you. It was a very gentle female voice that came out of the phoenix's mouth right before her eyes. Spirit beasts would gain the ability of using human speech once they have attained the 8th level and above, and Qingyu was not surprised by it. Moreover, Little Burrow had said that this was no ordinary spirit beast before them, but a type of super spirit beast that belonged to the divine beast category that could be said to possess heaven-defying powers. Why have you become so frail? Where is your original body? You are very weak now, and if you do not return to your original body, you will disappear very soon. Qingyu said with a rather grave expression on her face. The phoenix shook its head slightly and replied, My time was already running out, but I continued to remain here in order to fulfill my mission. Now that you've come, my mission has also come to an end. Mission? Qingyu asked, her face uncomprehending. The phoenix did not respond, like its strength had been stretched to its limits. The immense figure gradually turned more ephemeral and translucent before it completely disappeared with a mournful cry. It was empty inside the mountain cave, except for a human-shaped object in the corner that was emitting a faint glowing light. Qingyu's eyes narrowed as she took few steps to approach it. The soul fragment was so frail it could also no longer be seen, but the sense of familiarity she felt made Qingyu certain that it was a fragment of her mother's soul. She kept the soul fragment into the soul-nourishing orb very carefully, and then heaved a huge sigh of relief. But before she could fully relax and let down her guard for a single moment, her body suddenly tensed up. A bone-chilling feeling suddenly assaulted her senses, and Qingyu subconsciously leaned her body backwards to dodge that deadly strike. She spun herself around and spotted a person completely wrapped in black robes hidden within the shadows, not making a single sound as the dark figure blended fully into the surrounding darkness. The figure had intentionally suppressed his own aura, and that was why Qingyu had not noticed his presence all this while. Without knowing why, looking at the black-robed person, Qingyu suddenly felt as if she had seen someone like that before, finding the person's dressing highly familiar. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. All thoughts in her mind suddenly stopped for an instant. She suddenly remembered. This man was dressed very similarly to the black-robed woman with that frighteningly hideous face she encountered back in the Green Wave Kingdom's barricaded spirit tower. They were both wrapped up fully in jet-black clothes from head to toe, and they both gave out a highly sinister aura. So it seemed like the two white-clothed men who were dead had another companion, waiting quietly in here for the opportune moment to strike. carefully watching their every move. The objective that these people came here with could very well turn out to be the same as hers. Chapter 233. 1. Abducted by a mysterious person, the black-robed man walked out from the shadows slowly, his face hidden among his bundle of clothes. Only his ghastly white chin could be seen, which made him look highly compelling. "Hand over the soul fragment you just took." The man's voice was chilly and cold, speaking without the slightest emotion. Qingyu innocuously shifted her feet a step towards the cave's entrance as her hands weaved a strange and unique sign behind her back. She arched up an eyebrow as she looked at the man and said to him, "What if I refuse to hand it over?" The man then replied curtly, "Then only death awaits. I wonder who will die first between us?" Qingyu curled up the ends of her lips, and without waiting for the man's response, her body was already moving. The 5 golden needles at her fingertips glinted under the darkness, and with a flick of her hand, they shot right through the air towards 5 different spots of the dark-robed man's body. One of the golden needles was actually flying straight towards the lower half of the man, aimed at a spot that could not be explicitly described here. Shameless and despicable woman. Even though the man's expression could not be seen, just hearing his words spat out through tightly gritted teeth was enough to tell Qingyu how enraged he was. Qingyu blinked her eyes in innocence. How was she shameless and despicable? The figure of the man strangely disappeared from the spot he was standing in, easily dodging the 5 golden needles flying towards him. In the next instant, he appeared right before Qingyu, and his pale bony hand swiped across right in front of her face. She immediately felt an intense dizziness coming over her, which made her eyelids feel extremely heavy, and they were drooping down over her eyes. In that instant, just before she lost consciousness, there was only one thought that crossed Qingyu's mind. She has miscalculated and fallen prey to the opponent's sneak attack. Outside the cave, Zhongmai had detected another unfamiliar aura and was about to go inside when he unexpectedly received his mistress' instruction to not make any rash moves. In the end, after waiting it out for just a short while, he found that his mistress' aura had also disappeared as well. His eyes narrowed with a sharp glint, and his body shot speedily inside. The cave was empty without a single person in there. He tried to call out to Qingyu through their linked consciousness, but he did not get the slightest response. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. She must be in an unconscious state at that moment, and that was why she was unable to receive his thoughts. The youth's handsome-looking face could not help but came to be tinged with a sliver of deep, silent rage. Damn it! To think that a person was actually able to take his mistress away from right under his nose, that was absolutely unpardonable. When the youth had charged right into the mountain cave in a fluster, Lu Ji came to sense that something was wrong. Self-reproach showed on her face, and she then said to herself, "I should have gone in together with her." Chapter 233. 2. Abducted by a mysterious person, Qingyu had gotten them to wait outside for her, as she was afraid that too many people might startle the divine beast's remnant consciousness. After all, the divine beast showed it was not defensive towards Qingyu. How could Lu Ji have expected that in just a short while she would suddenly disappear completely? Hearing her utter those words, Zhang Mai's tone was stony as he said, "You wouldn't be of any help to her even if you had come in. The aura that was in here was more powerful than the combined strength of the other 2 men who died. You are not his match. I am my mistress' weapon spirit, and I will be able to sense her aura when she regains consciousness, which will lead me to where she is. As for you, I am returning back to Cloud Heaven." Lu Ji interrupted the youth. "Those people are from Cloud Heaven. Miss Qing must have been taken there. I will go back and report this to the Overlord. He will know what to do." But when the Overlord comes to know that she had actually allowed Miss Qing to be abducted right before her eyes, she would not be able to escape punishment. Lu Ji's fingers clenched up tightly, and her eyes narrowed slightly as she tried to hide any expression from showing on her face. She had not been able to protect the young lady who moved her heart. If anything was to happen to her. The aura surrounding her body grew depressing, and Lu Ji did not say anything more. She raised a slim arm and drew a line through the air before walking into the dimensional portal that had opened up. That was the fastest way for her to reach cloud heaven. Zhang Mai's lips curled up and he glanced at the spot that Lu Ji had just disappeared from. She's rather concerned about the mistress, though. Tearing a portal through time and space like that, if it was not done by people with unfathomable and profound cultivation, they would be severely injured by the turbulent surge within the dimensional tunnel. Although the woman's cultivation wasn't weak, but that would still affect her in some way. The youth lifted his elegant chin and sighed softly. "Oh, my mistress, even after being reborn into another world, your ability to attract people to you has not diminished in the slightest, and you're even not sparing the women now. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World." EU at that same moment, after falling into an unconscious coma, Qingyu was finally slowly coming awake. Her devilishly alluring phoenix-like eyes blinked in a confused daze. "And what is this place?" She moved her body, seeking to sit upright. But she had just turned herself over when she suddenly found herself falling. The shock caused her to quickly snap back to her senses as she immediately righted herself. The feeling of finally feeling firm ground under her feet was great. Ever since she came to this world, she was always constantly falling at every turn, which made her life here anything but boring. It was only when Qingyu felt the ground under her feet that she discovered that the place she had been lying on was actually a cloud. Her eyes involuntarily widened as she stared. What kind of a place is this? Did she die and come to heaven? Chapter 233. 3. Abducted by a mysterious person to think that one could possibly sleep on a cloud. That was just incredible. "You're awake." Just as she was taking in her foreign surroundings with a measuring gaze, the icy cold voice of a man suddenly sounded behind her, and it was a strangely familiar sounding voice. Qingyu turned around and saw a man in black robes approaching. "Since you're awake, come with me to go see the temple lord." When the man opened his mouth to speak again, Qingyu was certain. Isn't this the voice of the person who made her lose consciousness with a sneaky attack? But it was different now from the person who had been bundled head to toe in black robes till his countenance could not be seen at all. Although the man's voice was cold and indifferent, his countenance was however rather good-looking, pretty eyes and brows with cold hard features, making him look rather cool. Besides the fact that his complexion was a little too pale, he still looked rather pleasing overall. Qingyu raised an eyebrow and strolled casually over to the man, seemingly unafraid that the man would attack her again. Her lips parted slightly as she said, "Wouldn't you say how you just forcibly bring a person to this place without even a single word of warning seems to be rather rude?" Seeming like she was intentionally trying to tease him, the young lady widened her eyes and leaned her beautiful face closer. "Don't you know that skin contact between men and women is greatly frowned upon? So in what manner did you bring me here?" The man was startled by the sudden proximity as she leaned in close to him, and he innocuously took a step back as he snorted derisively. "I have never seen any woman who is as frivolous and flippant as you." Those words caused Qingyu to want to scratch her head in puzzlement. How? Has she been frivolous? Tossing that statement, the man just turned around with a curt, "Follow me," and went walking off without even turning his head around. Qingyu was speechless. The villains nowadays really act so self-righteously indignant. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU But Qingyu did not say anything but just followed behind the man, her eyes measuring her surroundings. He had probably noticed her wandering eyes as the man went on to say in an indifferent voice, "No need to waste your time. You won't be able to get out of here. Even if you're lucky enough to escape, you will not be able to go back down to the lower realms." Qingyu muttered a soft "oh" and then continued to ask, "Then why have you brought me here? Is it because I am pretty looking and you started to have nefarious designs on me?" A corner of the man's mouth twitched and he struggled to hold himself back for a good while before he managed to mutter in indignance, "Shameless." He was probably feeling too angry inside to speak as his strides quickened quite a bit. Qingyu could not help but laugh out loud behind, thinking that this guy was quite an interesting fella. "Hey, I'll say, what is this place? Do all of you always sleep on clouds? Aren't you afraid of falling off?" Chapter 233. 4. Abducted by a mysterious person, the man went walking ahead on his own, choosing not to hear another word the young lady was saying. Qingyu saw that she was being purposely ignored and thought she might as well give up. But with things quietened down, she suddenly discovered something different about the place. The spirit energy in this place was thick and robust, at least 10 times that of the constellation continent. She blinked her eyes in surprise. She had gone to the Whitefin lands a few years ago, and although the spirit energy had been more than adequate, it was not as abundant as it was here in this place. In the short while since she came awake, she could feel that her powers had increased by quite a bit. Her powers that had been stuck at the Sacred Burial Arts 7th level for quite a long time had started to change, shooting up quickly through the stages in an instant. In just a short while, she had shot from the 7th level's initial stages to the mid-stages peak, almost breaking through into the final stages. The speed her cultivation was growing at was terrifying. Qingyu suddenly seemed to realize something, and the expression on her face was a little stunned for a moment. Was this place the highest realm, the place they called Cloud Heaven? Could she really be that lucky? Qingyu suppressed her shock at that realization as she followed the man in front, unknowingly walking onto a bed of clouds, where grand and majestic palatial temple sat. When she first stepped into the main hall, it made her jump back at shock, for no other reason than the fact that the people in the great hall were dressed uniformly in black robes and white robes, standing respectfully with the bodies ramrod straight on both sides, their faces and bodies hidden within their robes, every single one looking like a dignified statue. They were all standing packed in neat rows, where there was at least 300 of them. That was quite a majestic and awe-inspiring sight. Just as Qingyu was stunned by the sight of so many people in front of her, she heard the cold, unfeeling voice of the man who had led her here. "Aren't you going to pay your respects to the Temple Lord?" Temple Lord? Following the man's gaze, Qingyu could not help but look up to see the person seated high up on the elevated pedestal hidden behind layers of soft, translucent silk curtains. The svelte figure of a woman could faintly be seen leaning back languidly, a sight beautiful as a painting. After the man said that to Qingyu, he bowed respectfully to the woman up on the pedestal and reported, "Temple Lord, this is the woman who has not only killed our people, but also snatched the thing that my lord seeks to possess." The woman behind the veil let out a soft laugh, her voice gentle and melodious, exhilarating to hear. "A person from the lower realms? Ha ha. It looks like there are more and more capable people in the lower realms in the past few years. Raise your head so that I can have a good look at you." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Qingyu was already standing at a lower level, and it was making it hard for the woman up there to see her. Hearing the woman's words, Qingyu lifted her head up. But she had just raised her head, and her flawlessly beautiful face had just been imprinted into the eyes of the woman behind the veil, when it immediately caused the woman's eyes to narrow sharply with a glint. Why does this face look so familiar? It looks so much like that person she has seen a countless number of times. But that person had clearly died. Just who is this woman? Chapter 234. 1. Attacked at night. After a long moment of silence, the woman's voice sounded behind the curtains, tinged with an indiscernible emotion. "What is your name? How could there be two people who look so much alike?" Although Qingyu was rather puzzled by the woman's question, she kept a smile on her face as she replied, "Yu Qing?" She had always used that name when she had cross-dressed as a man. This woman's got to be kidding. She still did not know whether this woman meant her any harm, but has had her captured for some unknown purpose. She was naturally not going to reveal her real name to her so easily. After she responded with those two characters, Qingyu heard the woman ask, "Which character is the Qing in your name?" Qingyu hesitated for a moment, and then smiled before she opened her mouth to reply, "The Qing that means endearment between spouses." The woman just sighed as if she did not hear Qingyu's reply. "Is it really all fated to be like this? What about the thing that you took? Hand it over." Qingyu's eyes lowered slightly, as she hid the dark glint flashing within. The expression on her face looked a little confused as she raised her eyes. "What did I take?" Seeing the befuddled look on her face, the man who brought her here to this place stepped in to say in a grave voice, You're still trying to deny it? That thing that the crimson gold fiery phoenix was guarding. Once the item is taken away, its remnant consciousness would fade away. You were the only other person besides me to go into that mountain cave. Oh, hearing that, Qingyu said without missing a beat. Couldn't you be the one who was coveting that treasure and have taken it away for yourself? You were reluctant to hand it over, and as I was coincidentally passing by the place, you came up with this plan to find a scapegoat by pushing the blame entirely onto my head. Suddenly stunned into a daze by Qing Yu's unbelievable ability to twist up facts and to turn the accusation right back onto him, the man was unable to react for a good long while. When he came back to his senses, his entire body trembled visibly as he spat out hatefully. That's pure and utter nonsense. Absolutely vile and malicious slander. When did I ever take it? You had clearly. You fawn. Why did you start to become so hot-headed? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, the woman commented in a soft voice, interrupting the man's raging fit. The man immediately hung his head. I beg for the temple lord to forgive my impudence. Yu Fawn has overreacted. I will naturally believe that you will not do something like that. You are the most loyal disciple of the divine temple, and you will never betray your lord. Yu Fawn's face looked genuinely moved for a moment, and he said, Your loyal servant is grateful for my lord's trust in me. Qingyu stood there listening in to their conversation, and she came to capture an important piece of information. Chapter 234. 2. Attacked at night, Divine Temple? Could it be one of Cloud Heaven's 5 great powers, the Bright Moon Temple? Lu Junyao had once told her that the voodoo grub and emotion-devouring curse he had been afflicted with definitely had something to do with someone from the Divine Temple, which was filled with a bunch of people skilled in evil and unorthodox methods, devious snakes who liked to employ sly and crafty schemes, all of them hated and repulsive. Although he was not all that good a person himself, he was still a lot more above board than that entire bunch. Although the Bright Moon Temple was seen to not interfere with any of the other powers on the surface, they were always secretly scheming and plotting against the various powers, not giving in a single inch to any of them. They went against the Dark Lands the most, seemingly unhappy to see the might of the Dark Lands being the strongest power, and was always trying to make them crumble. So, has she fallen right into the tiger's den? Take her away. The woman opened her mouth to say, not mentioning anything about wanting her to hand over the item the crimson gold fiery phoenix was guarding anymore. Although Yu Fawn did not really understand it, he was used to obeying orders given to him, so he brought Qingyu back to the place they were at originally. How do you people intend to deal with me? Are you just going to imprison me here forever for me to await death? I heard you people mention the Divine Temple earlier. Is this place the Bright Moon Temple in Cloud Heaven? Along the way, Qingyu tried to speak to the man, but Yu Fawn did not respond, not even a single word. But the fact that the young lady was able to guess that they were in the Bright Moon Temple had surprised Yu Fawn. He paused in his steps and then said to her, Since you know what this place is, then you know that you can forget about ever escaping from here. Qingyu laughed. I have not thought of escaping, as you people would not kill me after all. Humph. You're so certain that you will not die here? Yufan laughed scornfully. Did you not notice just now, when that temple lord of yours saw me earlier, she lost her composure a little? From that, you can tell that there must be more to the story, and that I look very much like a person she knew. Qingyu had analyzed it properly. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, but it must be said that Qingyu's intuition could be terrifyingly accurate at times. Hearing Qingyu's words, Yufun merely took it as a bunch of senseless ramblings and did not take it to heart. He brought her to the place they had been at earlier and immediately left with moody face. Qingyu watched him leave in speechlessness. She had merely unintentionally struck the nail right on its head, didn't she? But did he have to hold it against her and show her a face like she owed him several million taels of gold? She shrugged her shoulders helplessly. Qingyu then probingly touched the cloud she had laid on before. It was soft and fluffy, rather nice to touch. She then tried pushing her hand down on it a few times. Chapter 234. 3. Attacked at night, A firm and solid cloud? No wonder one would not fall through it. She sat cross-legged upon the cloud as she toyed with a soft corner with one hand. She was here in cloud heaven, and she wondered if she was a far distance away from that fellow Lu Junyao. As that thought ran through her mind, her hand subconsciously took out the purple crystal orb the man had given to her. She tried imbuing the orb with her spirit powers to sense him, but unexpectedly, she did not get any response at all, like her powers had been a pebble thrown into the ocean, unable to stir up even a ripple. A corner of Qing Yu's lips twitched. What is happening? Would being in a different location need her to probe with her powers in a different way? Or has it been blocked? Just the thought of that is so depressing. Temple Lord, are we going to leave that young lady from the lower realms like this? A white-robed old man asked respectfully. The woman behind the curtains affirmed. Of what use would keeping that young lady be to us? To turn her into a puppet? A black-robed old man on the other side asked in puzzlement. I cannot really see anything all that special in that young lady. The woman sighed slightly, and it was quite a long while before she asked in a soft voice, Doesn't any one of you feel that she looks very much like a certain person? Once those words came out, without knowing why, everyone subconsciously thought of a particular person. But that person was the goddess in the divine temple most favored by God back then, and the most highly gifted one, endlessly envied by everyone. It was clear that she should have inherited the divine temple's highest position, but just as the grand succession ceremony was about to begin, that person had mysteriously gone missing. Over a few hundred years since then, no one has heard anything about that goddess. But whenever that goddess was mentioned, not to mention just the bright moon temple, the entire cloud heaven would have heard of her. She wasn't only the most highly gifted goddess in the history of the divine temple who was highly revered, she also had a mysterious and powerful might backing her up from behind. So, what really happened back then? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU on the other side, Lu Ji had also reached the Darklands. She had fortunately progressed quite a ways in cultivation the past few years, so besides a slightly pale face, she had not suffered much in the way of injuries, merely carrying a forbidding and chilly air throughout the journey. She was originally already a frostily aloof beauty all this time, and seeing her carry a dark and gloomy face now only made her even more unapproachable. People from the Darklands she met along the way had greeted her, but were all met with complete disregard, her steps moving extremely fast, carrying her past them like the wind. The people of the Darklands were left scratching their heads. What could have happened? Why is she in such a frantic rush? Although Lu Ji's attitude towards them had never been all that friendly all this time, but she would usually at least nod in acknowledgement to them or respond with a few short words. Seeing her in such a mad rush today was a first for them, and they thought that it was rather strange. Chapter 234. 4. Attacked at night, my lord. Lu Ji has failed in my duty, and allowed something to happen to Miss Qing. I ask for my lord to mete out punishment. In the dim and dark-colored main hall, besides the man seated upon the throne, Bai Jiyin, Sun Luo, Mei Ji, Little Monster, and the bookish and scholarly-looking man were seated on the sides. Lu Ji was kneeling in the middle of the hall, her head hung very low. Lu Junyao had always been very lenient with his subordinates, and was not someone who bothered much with empty formalities, not to mention making his subordinates kneel here and there every time they came to make a report, which was just tiring to see. So he had waived all of them of a need for such piddling details. For so many years, this was the first time that the proud and haughty Lu Ji was seen to look so servile. The man on the throne did not say anything, and it was Bai Jiyin who spoke up in a bluster. What has happened to that lass again? Has she gotten herself hurt again? How long has it only been and she has? She was abducted. Lu Ji's voice was tinged with a faint hoarseness. The person seems to be from Cloud Heaven, but I do not know which one of the 5 powers he is from. From Cloud Heaven? Bai Jiyin raised an eyebrow in surprise. Where did she get taken away? In the faint mist sect's forbidden grounds. Lu Ji replied with a sharp glint in her eyes. That is rather interesting. To think that someone from Cloud Heaven would go all the way down to the lower realms. What could they have gone there for? Bai Jiyan asked as he looked up at the man seated high up on the pedestal who had not said a single word. And you do not seem to be anxious at all. Lu Junyao had his chin propped up in one hand, and his other hand was resting upon the eyeless snake on the chair's arm, his fingers tapping lightly. Hearing Bai Jiyan's words, his violet eyes looked up slightly. If she's in cloud heaven, then there is nothing to get anxious about. His tone of voice was not only calm and unworried, but he looked like he had known about this all along. You know where the lass is? Bai Jiyan asked in surprise. Lu Junyao replied indifferently. I will go find her tonight. His gaze swept indifferently over the woman kneeling in the center of the hall. Stand up. Considering the fact that she has not been hurt this time, this lord here will not place any blame onto you. But, though I am sparing you from death, you will still have to suffer some form of punishment. Lu Ji lowered her head. I await my lord's instructions. Go to the Black Cliff to receive 12 lashes, and reflect for a month against the wall in solitary confinement before you can come out. Lu Junyao said. I am grateful for my lord's benevolence, Lu Ji said as she retreated back out from the hall. Everyone knew in their hearts that the punishment meted out was light, and nobody was against that. Except for Mei Ji, who piped in to ask, My lord really knows where the lass is now? What do you think? Lu Junyao curved his lips up in a smile, an indiscernible glint in his eyes, which actually looked quite terrifying. Hence, when night fell, Bai Jiyan suddenly remembered something that he had to tell Lu Junyao, and he went over to his room to look for him. But he found it to be empty with no one inside, and he recalled what the man had said earlier that day. He has really gone to look for the lass? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, Bright Moon Temple, lanterns and candle light illuminated the place, and it was silent at this time of the night. Yu Fawn had come here once that night to deliver food. Although he had looked like he still wasn't happy to see her, Qingyu was not too bothered about it. She had naturally not touched a single bite of the food, as she would not want to be suddenly afflicted by some strange voodoo. Seated upon a soft, fluffy cloud with her eyes closed, she was just about to take full advantage of the thick and robust spirit energy in the air of this place when she suddenly detected the aura of another person. It had sprouted out of nowhere all of a sudden and huddled under a cape. It was lunging straight towards her. Chapter 235. 1. Little Demoness, really want to eat you up. The figure that was lunging straight towards her at great speed caused Qing Yu's eyes to narrow, and the hand supporting her body's weight against the cloud beneath her quickly pushed her up, as she swept a long, slender leg out in a powerful whirlwind kick, aimed right at the fast-approaching figure. Sneaking his way in here in the middle of the night and was trying to spring a surprise attack on her? Huh. A lecher. Mask your face, won't you? Then I pummel your face so hard you will be ashamed of ever showing your face to anyone. The opponent was, however, calm and composed, not showing the slightest sign of panic. Upon seeing the young lady's foot was aimed right at his head in a vicious sweeping kick, his eyes that were hidden under the darkness seemed to flash with an almost imperceptible mirthful glint before he caught the young lady's ankle in his hand. With a slightly forceful tug, he pulled her forward straight towards himself. If she allowed him to pull her over like that, she knew that she would end up in a highly awkward position, falling right onto the man's body. Qingyu scoffed coldly, and her entire body flipped in the air as she swung her other leg in another sweeping kick. Catching that one moment that the man would have no choice but to release his grip on her ankle, she raised her free hand up slightly, and several gold needles shot out towards the man. Her needles were made from a special material, exceptionally tough and strong. Thrown out with internal strength, they were able to pierce through armor, and a person could easily be turned into a sieve with her needles. But before Qingyu could finish that gleeful thought in her mind, the next thing that happened right in front of her eyes in the very next instant caused her to stare incredulously in open-mouthed shock. Her golden needles were finer than cow hair, and they were flying at incredible speed through the air. Not to mention when it was under the darkness of night, one would not be able to see them clearly even in the light of day. That person was not only able to perfectly dodge every single one of those golden needles shooting at him from all kinds of impossible angles, he managed to render them all harmless and kept them properly into his sleeve. Qingyu remained silent as a vein throbbed on one side of her temple. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Absolutely maniacal. It was while she was still in that stunned daze that the person had come to hold her by her waist and pressed her back down onto the comfortably soft cloud. And before she could even start to throw a fit, the man suddenly pulled the voluminous cape that covered him completely from head to toe right off his body and tossed it aside. What met her eyes was a figure clad in devilishly flamboyant purple and a pair of violet eyes that looked like they were filled with stars that studded the night skies that were gazing smilingly at her. Qingyu blinked her eyes, and the expression on her face looked highly befuddled in that one instant. It took her a long while before she was able to react, where she then pulled the man's head down and bit him right on his fair-skinned neck. She bit quite hard, so viciously like she almost wanted to bite off a piece of his flesh. Chapter 235. 2. Little Demoness, really want to eat you up. Lu Junyao let out a soft cry, but did not push her away. His voice sounded a little helpless as he said, "To think that I had been so excited to come look for you, but here you are attempting to murder your beloved the moment we meet. What a heartless little thing you are." Qingyu scoffed coldly and released the man's delicate neck. Upon seeing the reddened bruise with traces of blood still oozing out, she was finally satisfied. Hearing the man's words, Qingyu did not feel the slightest bit guilty but arched up an eyebrow to look at him. "Who asked you to come sneaking around in the middle of the night to come frighten me? I'm already being merciful by not biting you to death." "Oh, in that case, I'll take it that this is your way of showing how much you missed me then." Lu Junyao nodded his head knowingly. His eyes then flashed with a dark glint before he said, "Then it is now my turn to show you how much I missed you next." "Show how much you missed me." Qingyu had still not fathomed what his words meant when his handsome face leaned in close to her, and the pressure upon her lips shocked her so much she suddenly forgot to think. While she was still spacing out, the man who was violating her on her lips suddenly opened his mouth slightly and bit her hard on her soft, tender lips. Sensing pain caused her to subconsciously open her mouth. That sly, slippery fella immediately took the chance to slip inside, teasing and taunting, causing the young lady who was frowning in mild anger to blush a peach blossom pink as she gasped for air. After the tangled bout of sentimental kisses, the young lady who had been a little indignant was rather overcome with passion at that moment. "How is it? Are you still angry?" Lu Junyao asked as he gazed at the flushed face in his arms, her lips a little swollen and red, her eyes deep and immersive. The young lady's impassioned look was just too alluring, and he could not help but started thinking too. Qingyu saw the man's devilishly attractive eyes start to grow darkly deep once again, and she quickly stretched her hand out to push away his lips that were bullishly coming in close once again as she turned her head slightly to the side. Her voice sounded exceptionally alluring because of the raging emotions inside, so seductive it was killing Lu Junyao. "Don't come any closer. You're just like a ravenous wolf." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Her words that sounded like she was complaining caused the man to laugh out loud, but because the young lady's soft hand was clasped over his mouth, the sound came out a little muffled. His warm breath spread over her palm, and it felt a little ticklish. Qingyu pulled her fingers back a little, thinking of putting her arm down, but the man unexpectedly stuck his tongue out mischievously to lick her hand just as she was moving her hand away. Qingyu's face flushed red in an instant. How devilishly seductive! With his beloved clasped softly in his arms, Lu Junyao was feeling satisfied and happy as a lark. His heart was more at ease having the little one at his side after all. However, he had not forgotten to ask about the serious business at hand. He lowered his head and looked at the young lady to ask, "How did you come to attract the eye of the Divine Temple's people? And they actually brought you all the way here?" Chapter 235. 3. Little Demoness, really want to eat you up. I went into the faint mist sect's forbidden grounds and I heard the roar of a powerful divine beast. The ground suddenly split open after that, and both Lu Ji and I fell underground. It was another world down below, and there was a cave down there, where the remnant consciousness of a divine beast, the crimson gold fiery phoenix, resided. I thought that it was trapped in there and had wanted to rescue it, never expecting that it was guarding my mother's soul fragment that was inside the cave. Speaking about that, Qing Yu's eyes were slightly moist. In the soul-nourishing orb held within the palm of her hand, a frail soul fragment lay quietly. I did not know why that divine beast trusted me so much. Its consciousness dissipated away when it saw me. After I kept my mother's soul fragment safely away, I was careless and was surprised by a sneak attack from a man wrapped in black robes. The next thing I knew, I found myself here in this place when I woke up. Lu Junyao listened in silence, and he came to understand how it all happened. The divine temple had probably detected the crimson gold fiery phoenix's aura and had gone there seeking to capture it. But they had probably not expected the thing that the divine beast had been guarding was not any heavenly treasure, but just a fragment of Ant Lan's soul. Lu Junyao laughed softly as he caressed the young lady's face gently. He then opened his mouth to say, "Do you know why it was guarding Ant Lan's soul, and why it chose to hand it over to you?" Qing Yu's brows furrowed together, and she shook her head. "I don't know." The crimson gold fiery phoenix was a divine beast Ant Lan contracted back then, and it shared a very deep and close relationship with Ant Lan. You carry her blood in you, and your body carries a tinge of her aura. That is why the crimson gold fiery phoenix would naturally trust you. Lu Junyao explained slowly. Qing Yu's eyes widened up in surprise. It was Mother's contracted divine beast? Such heaven-defying power? Her mother actually had a divine beast? A divine beast. And it had looked like the divine creature had come from an extremely pure and noble bloodline of phoenixes, of a highly kingly type. Her mother really possessed some great power. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Undisguised astoundment and worship was showing on the young lady's face. Lu Junyao could not help but laugh. That is nothing. Ant Lan was someone that rocked the entire cloud heaven back then. Merely possessing one divine beast would not be surprising for a person like her. The man's violet eyes surged turbulently for an instant. When the day where the one destined by heaven comes back to life arrives, it will be the day the divine temple's lord and master will change. Let me take you away from here first. Lu Junyao pushed back the emotions rising up inside. He carried the young lady up horizontally in his arms and was about to leave through a dimensional tunnel. Wait. Qing Yu placed her hands on the man's shoulders and looked at him to say, "I am not ready to leave this place just yet." Chapter 235. 4. Little Demonis, really want to eat you up? Lu Junyao raised his eyebrow up questioningly. Why? This is not a fun place to be in, and you want to remain here? Qing Yu curled her lips up in a smile and squirmed out from his embrace. Do you know something? I met the Temple Lord of the Bright Moon Temple today. She had initially wanted to get rid of me, who has been disrespectful to her. But when she saw my face, she actually changed her mind and got her people to take good care of me, decided not to kill me, but also not paying any attention to me. Lu Junyao's eyes narrowed. What are you trying to say? Qing Yu's eyes curved up into crescents, shining clear and bright. I must really look very much like my mother, right? The expression on Lu Junyao's face creased up a little. What? You do not need to hide it from me. When I came to this place, I was already able to sense something. Qing Yu's lips curved up in a smile and said, I think this temple lord must be old friends with mother. Lu Junyao sighed in helplessness as his large was placed on her head and ruffled the young lady's hair. Why are you so smart? I had originally not wanted you to know that so soon. It's all right. You do not have to tell me. I will find it out for myself. Qing Yu replied. Anyway, that woman isn't as harmless as she looks on the surface. If you continue to remain here, I cannot help but be worried. Lu Junyao said with furrowed brows, not agreeing with her decision. The expression on that handsome face was stiff and tight, looking highly displeased. Qing Yu smiled and raised herself up on her toes to kiss the man's perfect jawline before blinking her eyes to say mischievously, If you're really so worried, I wouldn't mind having you come sneaking in here every night. It was clearly just a normal suggestion, but it was clear it had changed in meaning in Lu Junyao's ears. The look on his face became a little strange as he suddenly lowered his head to bite the young lady on the tip on her pointed, perky nose in frustration. "You're really such a naughty little one." Qingyu widened her eyes in surprise, and her face looked stunned as she held her reddened nose that had just been bitten. What did she say? In what way has she been naughty? But very soon, the man understood her puzzlement. "If you are going to make me come here every night for a little while like this, I will surely be driven mad by you sooner or later," Lu Junyao said as he pulled the slender young lady into a tight embrace, and his voice then sounded through tightly clenched jaws. "Do you know, I've lived for over 200 years. "I know that." Qingyu nodded her head. She had known that a long time ago, and she had never despised him for that. So what was this fella trying to tell her? "You are the first woman I have ever loved so much. I care a lot about you, and I like having you close to me. Even just embracing you like this, I am finding it hard to hold myself back." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Eub, every time I kiss you, I am always thinking, might as well just eat up this tormenting little vixen, as you'll be mine sooner or later anyway. Qingyu felt her face burn, and her heart raced, a feeling she rarely ever felt. This guy, just who is the seductive vixen here? He's always the one whispering sweet nothings endlessly. If not for her strong willpower, most other girls would not be able to withstand it. Moreover, this demon here has such an exceptionally mesmerizing flesh shell, where even she has been inextricably hooked. Qingyu bit her lip, suddenly wanting to win back around. "Then you'd better not come look for me." Chapter 236. 1. Sisters who try to kill each other. This guy's mind is just filled with dirty thoughts, and he's blaming her for it. Hearing the young lady's playfully mocking words, Lu Junyao just could not help but took a nibble of her cheek. "That will not do. You're already here on the same continent with me. How could I possibly bear to leave you all alone in this snake's nest? But since you are so determined to remain here, I must at least come see that you are safe and sound every night to set my heart at ease. But there is one thing you have got to promise me. You must not make any rash moves, as that woman is a lunatic." Lu Junyao reminded a little worriedly when that thought suddenly came to mind. Qingyu's lips pouted and grumbled in a soft voice. "I know what to do. Why does it seem like whenever you're around, I am thought to be a person that is completely helpless and does not know anything at all? Ha, you little fox. You're complaining that I am being concerned about you?" Lu Junyao shook his head. His gaze then turned deep before he continued. "About the communication crystal orb, are you unable to use it now? I was just about to ask you. Is there some array or something that isolates any signal or spirit powers from the world outside? I wanted to tell you that I have come to Cloud Heaven earlier, but there wasn't any reaction at all when I infused the crystal orb with spirit power." Qingyu asked him, a look of puzzlement on her face. "You have always been very smart, so it would not be surprising if you were able to guess it." Lu Junyao reached a hand out to caress the young lady's hair and continued to say slowly, "Within the divine temple grounds, not only is there an array that isolates them from the rest of the world, nobody is able to sense the people's aura in here from outside as well, and most people are not able to set foot in here as well. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World." Without waiting for the young lady to open her mouth to ask further, he continued to explain. "The Bright Moon Temple flourished for a period of time thousands of years ago, and legend has it that it was where the gods lived. Hence the air of divinity is extraordinarily thick and robust in here. I will assume you have already realized just how intense and abundant the spirit energy in here really is. But you could not possibly have known that many years ago, any mortal who stayed in the divine temple for a period would be able to extend their lifespans by several decades, as that was when the spirit energy in here was at its purest. Under the brilliant leadership of a wise god back then, the divine temple was the most unshakable power that stood in Cloud Heaven. It was only when the god departed from the world in an accident that the divine temple started to fall into decline, never to return to its old glory." Listening up till that point, Qingyu could not help asking, "This god, how long did he live for?" People in cloud heaven all lived past 100 years, and when one manages to make it through to 1,000 years old, their cultivation would advance to a whole different level, their lifespan extended by another 1,000 years at least. But the god, on the very same year that he was to turn 1,000 years old, was found dead in his room. Qing Yu's eyes widened. For some unknown reason, a terrifying thought rose up in her mind, and she said reflexively, "Is it possible that the god did not die in an accident, but was actually murdered?" You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.